It is mankind's biggest fear, dying. Is there any proof of life after death? I was raised Catholic, and although I believe in faith and God, it wasn't enough to rest my fears. People often ask me, where is heaven? Where are our loved ones after they've passed away? There are two ways to live. You can live as if nothing is a miracle. You can live as if everything is a miracle. All we are is energy. Talking about dowsing, dowsing rods can pick up energy. Dad, if you're with me, just show me where you are. Electronic voice phenomena is something I want to share with you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, do you ever wonder what happens to us when we die? Wouldn't you like to interact with your loved ones from the other side? Do you even believe in life after death? Sandra Champlain, once a skeptic, does, and like most of us, she feared dying. That led her on a 15-year journey to find proof that life after death is real. She's a highly respected speaker, entrepreneur, author of the #1 international bestseller, We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death, and subject of the video documentary, We Don't Die, which we just heard the trailer for. Her website is sandrachamplain.com, author Sandra Champlain on Facebook, and at Sandra Champlain on Twitter. You can go to dark30radio.com to look at her book and to link right to her website. We say good evening to you, Sandra. How are you tonight?
I'm really good. I'm excited to be here. I listened to the beginning of your show. I didn't know about Tracy Morgan. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Oh, yeah. Did you not, were you not aware that he had that contact with his father?
No, I didn't know that. So I want to research that more. That's awesome.
Well, basically, he says that, he had, he basically has said that, he's a nicer person, that he looks at everybody differently. He treats everybody with the love and respect that, everybody deserves. And that's something that he would have never done prior to this traumatic accident. In your work, I guess, is that a common occurrence when people do have an experience like that? They do come away as a changed person?
They do. I started my own podcast, WeDon'tDieRadio.com, and I interview people now, different than your show, but just why they believe in life after death. And one of the common denominators with people who have had near-death experiences are, number one, they remember them like they were just yesterday, even if it was 30 years ago. But they also come back with this feeling that all they want to do is give and make a difference. This feeling that life is for a purpose. It's for loving people, like our soul growth and making a difference in other people's lives. So they all have become changed people. Really, even the bad guys, So I talked to some bad guys, and they came out changed people. So that's pretty cool.
Do you still fear death?
I don't fear death. What I fear is suffering. I saw my dad suffer with cancer, and it's just the last way I'd want anybody to have to go. But the actual moment of death, I think it will be pretty glorious. I mean, we all have this negative voice in our head a lot of the times. I can't say all the times. And we never stop thinking. And just to be set free, and when we close our eyes on planet Earth for the last time, we open them surrounded by our loved ones, people that have gone before us, in a place what they tell me is more real than we are experiencing right now. So I think that actual moment of dying, I don't have any fear about. I don't want anybody to be sick or suffering or pain especially. So
would you say it's a little bit of an angelic experience?
Angelic. Let me see. That I don't know. I have a day job, Jeremy, and I'm a chef. I work with race car teams.
Wow. Which
is pretty interesting. And very secretly, I've been on this
Everybody
journey.
needs food.
Everybody needs food, correct. But I've secretly been on this journey studying the afterlife. And eventually, when my book came out, I actually had to come clean with people in my life that this is what I was doing. And so at the racetrack, I cook for, can be about 1,000 people a meal at some of the races. But I have a book banner that says, "Is there proof of life after death?" Sandra Champlain says yes, and it's my tent, so I can hang that up and do book signings and things. Well, there's a retired race car driver who's now a pretty well-known TV announcer. I don't have his permission to use his name, but he came over to me and he said, Sandra, what's this all about? Why are you getting into life after death here? And I gave him my abbreviated story. And he says, I've never told anybody this, but he said, when I was in my 20s, I got into a car accident and actually got to the hospital, flatlined on an operating table. They had to revive me. I went into a coma. He says, but while I was having that experience, he says, I actually opened my eyes. My grandmother, my grandfather were there in a world more real than this, made this life seem like just a dream. He said there were colors that I can't even explain, and then it was so crystal clear and sharp. And he said, I was so comfortable and so safe, and it seemed very much like Earth, but different. But he said, I was safe. I knew I had died. But he said, I also got the opportunity to float above my body and see my mom, my dad praying for me, and his brother there too. And he says, I knew instinctively, like I had a choice to continue on with Grandma and Grandpa, and I'd be fine in heaven, or be back in Earth. And he says the right thing to do was going back to Earth. And he said when he opened his eyes, he said he was in an incredible amount of pain physically because of the accident. But he said, here's the thing that happened. He says, I knew life after death was real. I didn't fear dying, so I didn't fear living. So Jeremy, he raced in 3 different series of auto racing, and he became champion in all 3. And he said, it's because I could put my foot on the pedal further than anybody, take more risks, and as a result, he won. So I don't necessarily need people to go 220 miles per hour and live life that way. But one of the reasons I wrote my book is if people don't fear dying, I think we won't fear living. We can take some more chances. We can go after our dreams. We can be courageous in the face of fear. And so I can't really say it's angelic, but I think it's a very real world that we experience. Are there angels? People say there are, but I don't know. I think there's as many different experiences, like what heaven's like for people, as maybe how each one of us would describe living on Earth.
Sandra, certainly people even say that aliens might be angels, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. Just thought I would throw that in. So how does Sandra get from being a skeptic to a believer, if you want to call it that? We don't die. Could it really be the truth? Of course, you know my stance on this. Anytime a story about consciousness comes up, it piques my interest, usually goes to the front of the list as far as the topics that I love to talk about first here on the program, because it is, in my mind, what ties us all together. There is something that is responsible for this communication, and we'll get into that a little bit later on with Sandra. We were talking about once fearing death and now no longer fearing death. What Sandra told us is she just fears the suffering that goes on with death. And I had asked her if she had thought that passing away was an angelic experience. And the reason I asked that, Sandra, was because of people who say that they see the light when they leave this earth.
Yeah, a lot of people see the light. It's a lot of different stories and near-death experiences, but so many people see the light. And even I'd mentioned a couple of bad guys before. There's a doctor that I had talked to that he was a chief of anesthesiology, and he was all about money. So this is kind of one of those dark side near-death experiences. But he said, honestly, I was about money. He said, I had a Hummer, a Mercedes, some other sports car. He said, I had a house with a $12,000 a month mortgage payment. He said, you see these horror stories of doctors in the ER, and they're playing music and they're gabbing about everything other than the patient. He says, I was one of those guys. And he himself had a near-death experience due to some accident that had happened. But he said when he opened his eyes, he said he was in such a dark place. He would describe it kind of like a hell, and really like creepy. And one thing, Jeremy, that people say with these near-death experiences is you replay your life. You have, a lot of people hear about this, the life review, and you actually live your life from the perspective of the people that you dealt with. So this man saw his life and all the negative things he did and felt all the pain he caused so many people. people. And most people also then follow with having an experience of seeing the good that they did. But for this man, I mean, he really lived his life very, very selfishly, all about the ego. And he said it was really a tough place. But he saw this little pinprick of light. So you mentioned the light. And he said he wasn't religious at all, but he saw this little pinprick of light. And he just like instinctively knew to pray, because he was so fearful. And the more he prayed, the larger the light got. And the light became so bright that he felt Jesus showed up for him, even though he hadn't been a believer before. And he got to see the future of his life if he were to change his ways. And so that man, when he opened his eyes again, he says now he makes his life about waking people up as opposed to putting them to sleep. His wife, they were Hindu, and he said, not practicing, but she's like, what happened to the 1,000 Hindu gods we believe in? He's like, I don't know. Jesus was there. And he says, I felt loved. And so it totally changed his life around. So I think there can be some negative experiences when we don't live life the best way we can. But for many, many people, that light does show up. And for some people that are good all their lives, it's like they're greeted right away in a very, very light kind of place, just like this feeling of unconditional love. How's that explanation of?
It's a great explanation. I'm just wondering, should we go to the light?
Yeah, I don't think. I think it feels so good, and like it's an experience of being at home. From what people tell me, that it's just warm, loving, like being at home. And for many, many people, that light isn't there. They're immediately surrounded by their loved ones who have passed. Their animals are there. They wake up and they're surrounded by love. So, like I said, for every human being, if we were to explain our life on Earth, it would be a little different story. I think our death's going to be the same way, just a lot of similar features, but for every one of us, we have a slightly different experience of how it goes.
855-952-TALK. That's 855-952-8255, our toll-free telephone number. You can Skype the program as well at Dark 30 Radio with Sandra Champlain. Her website is sandrachamplain.com, and she's author of We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. So if one chooses not to go to the light, I'm told that they only get a second chance to go to the light once Jesus has come back to Earth, and they're basically stuck in purgatory, kind of here between dimensions. So what we call those earthbound spirits.
I've heard of earthbound spirits. I've studied with Doreen Virtue. I don't know if you know who she is. She talks as the angel lady. She was a psychologist turned medium when little voices started showing up in her head for good reasons. But I trained with her, and she talked about these earthbound spirits. And there's people, and I'm not the expert on this, but some of it makes sense to me. There are people that aren't willing or have fear of being dead, crossing over, like they've had either unfinished business here on Earth. There's stories of people that have, maybe they just built a new house or just got married or just had a baby and refuse to believe that it's over. So they don't go through the light. They stay close to the energy here on Earth, and we might call them ghosts. It's not a very healthy place for a spirit to be. And from what I was trained in, for some of these people, if they're willing, to actually talk to them and help them go through the light and let them know that they can come back anytime, but where they are isn't very healthy. So I'm not the expert on that subject, but I do know I was asked to do a house clearing, like a Ghostbuster thing, and I was set up for that, not expecting it, not ever doing it before. And I have been trained in mediumship, and I got a real vision of a guy that just didn't want this young South American family in his house. He was very, very angry. And, I didn't know if this is in my mind, if I'm making this up, or if this is real, but I saw this old man with a cane, and he just didn't want any part of this family being in his house, and he haunted it. I mean, he made it very hard for them to live in, and So there I am, not having really a clue what to do, but I pretended well. I brought crystals and sage, and I've been trained in electronic voice phenomena, so I brought my recorder and, did all these things, and I did what I believed was the right thing to do, and to send this guy through the light. And very interesting, when the family came back in, the little boy had said, the old man with the cane, he was talking about this old man with the cane, something that I had seen in my mind's eye. So who knows if it worked, if it didn't. The family said that ghosts never appeared again. I don't know, it's very cool, but I think that could be part of the answer for maybe some of these earthbound spirits. They're just not ready to leave planet Earth.
Yeah, we're going to touch on that a little bit later on as well. I've got another guest coming on after you, Sandra, with the website diedinhouse.com.
Very cool.
So we're listeners, you'll have to stick around for kind of part 2 of this conversation about death tonight. So at one point you were a skeptic. Why were you a skeptic on the afterlife?
I grew up in a household, and not faulting my parents in any way, because I grew up, I'm going to be 50, actually, day after tomorrow.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's only getting better. Life is only getting better. But as a kid, my dad was an airline pilot, and really only talk of, if we can see it, it's real, right? That's it. And there was a lady that lived in our town that was the local medium, and I just remember hearing, kids, stay away from her. None of that stuff's real. And you have to know, Jeremy, my dad was God. I looked up to him. If Dad said it, it was the truth. Which I do have a good UFO story after this one, but because it goes right along with your show, something my dad saw as an airline pilot, if we can take a tangent to there at some point during the show. But growing up, it was just if we couldn't see it, it's not real. And mediums and spiritual stuff, none of that's real. So I just believed it. And, we believe what our parents say. It's okay. And so growing up, we grew up in a Catholic family, went to church every Sunday. Okay, fine. Had heard stories of faith and Jesus and heaven and stuff. And okay, great. But when I don't remember how old I was exactly, low 30s, I just developed this incredible fear of dying. I don't know exactly where it came from. I'd seen a lot of death, actually, as a teenager. I worked in a nursing home, and some of the people that I worked with passed away, but I didn't think anything of that at the time. But this fear came over me so strongly that I couldn't go to bed at night without asking, what's going to happen to me? Is there something going to happen to me? Or looking up at the stars, and it's just does Sandra go on, or when it's over, it's over. And it just developed as a huge fear. And I couldn't, religion didn't help me quench the fear, but being a skeptic, I couldn't turn to anything spiritual, because I thought the people that believed in that stuff were nuts. Anybody who believed in angels or mediums or psychics, crazy. So I was really stuck. It was a hard place to be for a couple of years, until I started just doing some investigation very secretly, which I can tell you some more about what I found. Did that answer your question?
It did. And then, hang on. And then.
Okay.
All right, so then eventually you did turn around, right? There was some sort of that was just my try at humor. Sometimes it fails, sometimes it succeeds.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah, it's good.
so Sandra, what was it that the light bulb went off for you that said, I really believe in life after death?
Well, I had met a new friend who was one of those airy-fairy, angel-y kind of people. And as much as she was talking about that stuff, she was really a great lady. Her name was Nancy. And I liked her so much as a friend that I'd be humored when she started talking about angel cards and your spirit guides. And yeah. Well, she gave me a deck of angel cards. And if people don't know what they are, they're just cards that each one has a positive message for you from an angel. And I thought, well, of course you're going to find a positive message in any card you pull. But I kept having this experience of pulling the same card out, And even though I shuffled them, like, how is that happening? And as it turned out, it was a card that said music, and I started playing music more regularly, and I started having these kind of psychic experiences. I would know songs coming on the radio before they were played, and like that kept happening. And I kept testing it. Like, maybe I heard the DJ saying it, the name of the song, and no, that wasn't happening. Like, I could honestly know what was happening before it happened. And then same thing, before a phone would ring, I would get the name like Shannon. And then all of a sudden I'd answer the phone and be some telemarketer named Shannon. Like, strange stuff. And so I looked to see who invented these angel cards, and it's this woman named Doreen Virtue. And I went to her website, Angel Therapy, and lo and behold, she offered a 3-day course in mediumship. You will be somebody who can effectively tell the deceased around others if you attend my class. That was the course. That's what it said. And I thought, nobody, now come on, nobody can teach something like that. However, my fear of dying was so strong, even though the skeptic side of me said this is all, not real. But I took the class anyways. I lied to my family friends. I said I was going out for some other kind of business course, and lo and behold, I take this 3-day course in mediumship out in Laguna Beach, California. And when I was there, there's just a small group of us. This happened immediately on the first day, Jeremy. She says, I'm going to show everyone how medium readings are done, but we're not going to do it yet because you're not trained. But she says, I want everybody to grab a partner. She says, what we're going to do once you're trained is you're going to visualize that you're connecting heart to heart with your partner. You're going to imagine like this bubble around you, just safety, and imagine a lot of energy. The deceased need energy to come through and be able to show themselves. So just imagine that you're filling the area with energy. And she says, I want you to make up that there's a human being standing behind your partner. Close your eyes, and as mediums, you just tell the story. Who's there, what they look like, maybe what they died of, what they did for work, and if there's any messages that come through. So, Jeremy, because she gave us the okay to make this up, I, with my eyes closed, tell my partner, I see a man standing behind you. I'm guessing it's on your mom's side, it's your grandfather. I see a fisherman. He lives in Denmark. His name is Jan. He's got a big gap between his front teeth. He's got blonde hair, windburned skin. He died of lung cancer. And he never told your mom that he loved her. And he wants you to tell her that he's with her and he's proud of her and he loves her. So again, Jeremy, I am making this all up, right? Because that's the homework. So I open my eyes and there's just streams of tears coming down my partner's face. Her grandfather's name was Jan. He was a fisherman in Denmark. Every single thing I said about the man, including dying of lung cancer and never telling, this woman's mother that he loved her, was all accurate. And then she went and she talks to me about my grandfather with his cane, his golden retriever, his work clothes, what he did for work. I mean, it was mind-blowing. It was it just opened the door that there is something possible here. I mean, it creeped me out, but I was like on a roller coaster. I stayed buckled on because I'm like, what else can we learn here? Because there is something to it. And for the first time, my fear started to dissipate.
In case you haven't noticed, we like to have fun on this program more with Sandra Champlain. So, Sandra, in all of your experiences, what do you believe happens to us when we pass over?
The moment we die, our bodies die, I say we still stay energy. We opened our eyes. We're greeted by our loved ones. These near-death experiences and having the life review. I do believe we review our lives from the point of view of others. So that tells me deal with your stuff while we're here on Earth. Make your amends. If you're going to replay them anyways, let's just get this taken care of once we're here. But you do see any good you do. You see the ripple effect of all the good you did and how far it fans out. I think that's awesome. I think we're going to be in a land that looks very much like where we are, but I think a few more elements to it. Everything's really enhanced, our sight, smell, everything. I think it's a place for rest, rejuvenation, looking at what we learned while we were in the physical body, what we learned while we were on Earth. I think heaven is a place of all good, and here on Earth is the place where you get the good and the bad, the emotions, the ups, the downs. This is where the juicy part of learning takes place, right here on Earth. So in the afterlife, we look at it. We look to see how well we did. We wait for our loved ones to join us. A lot of people talk about reincarnation, and there's a common belief that we reincarnate in soul groups. So we actually come in as a party of people that are all here to help each other learn and grow.
Wow, that's a new one.
Yeah, I think that's phenomenal. So that, it might not be the moment you die, you wake up and you're a baby again or anything like that. It is to really debrief how this time went. And they say, too, it's a real honor to be able to come into life and to be able to be in a body, that there's a bunch of souls that are just waiting for the chance, the opportunity, because this is the best growth for a human soul coming to Earth.
Well, we got backed up a little bit there with Sandra Champlain. My apologies, but after the top of the hour news break, we'll be back and we'll hit this full steam in the next hour. Sandra Champlain, Life After Death. This is Dark 30 on the Mutual Broadcast Network. What she believes happens after we pass, and she was not quite done finishing.
Oh, I think I was done.
Oh, you were done?
Yeah, because you get to a point where it's like, what's next? And the people that have had these near-death experiences, there's stuff that happens that they can't form into words. So there's something so glorious that our brains don't have the capacity to either understand or communicate. So I can say, they say it's going to be great. However, there's no reason to get there too fast, because there is so much to be done here on Earth.
Yeah.
And I'd love to tell you some of the other things that I explored, Jeremy, if there's time, that really seal the deal for me that life after death is real.
Sure. I mean, why don't you tell us about some of those now? I mean, help us understand how somebody who believes, who doesn't believe in life after death now does. I think that will help us get a grasp of things a little better.
Yeah, and I also want to give your listeners a gift. I had mentioned earlier that I have my own podcast, WeDon'tDieRadio.com. That's what I call it. And I have a link there that says the Insiders Club. And it's nothing too extraordinary in the club, but I do give anybody who goes there the chapters of my book that explain all the different research that I did. Because I usually on a radio show, I don't have enough time to tell everything, but I want to just give you everything, just so when you have your time to go read it. And so I offer that as a gift. And then also all the interviews that I do have of people's stories of really extraordinary stories of out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, remote viewing, hospice workers being with people when they pass away, and so many other things. So as far as me and my skepticism and opening the door, certainly was taking that course in mediumship. At that point, though, as great as that course was, I was only right seeing people on the other side, maybe 30 to 40, sometimes 50% of the time, because the images came through just as my imagination. So I couldn't differentiate between the guy on the fishing boat and me inventing a person. I mean, it all seemed like my imagination. So as comforting as it was that I was picking up on reality, I had no backbone to now go home and tell people that I learned this, because I not unlike most people, we want people to like us. We want people to accept us, and never being one of these spiritual woo-woo people, I did not want to say, hey, I just took a course in mediumship and, I saw dead people. Because what would people ask? Well, who do you see around me? And Jeremy, if I tried to do this and I was wrong with someone, I mean, I was frightened that I'd be cast out of relationships, and I wasn't about to risk that. So I never told anybody, but very secretly I just kept digging. I started studying into the world of reincarnation, hearing Dr. Ian Stevenson, who is now deceased, but he had studied over 3,000 children who had memories of past living life, and so many things have been proven. I just interviewed a great woman on my show named Susan Massino, and she had a 3-year-old child who started drawing pictures of the Titanic. even drawings of inside the ship, really detailed. And no doubt about it, some of the things he knew, nobody knew about the Titanic. And, she really believes he was on the ship and was one of the engineers when it went down. There's a lady here in Massachusetts, and her name is Rita Berkowitz. And for the last 30 years, not only being a psychic medium, she's an artist, and she's got a great website called thespiritartist.com where people can go see these portraits that she's drawn. She will have a medium reading with you, either over the phone or in person, but not only tell you who's with you, is the same time she's got a notebook and she's drawing their picture. And even after my dad passed away, she drew a picture of what my dad looked like when he was in the Air Force in his 20s. I mean, really looked like him. And she, the whole time she's telling me how he died, the months that he got sick, he had cancer. So specific, Jeremy, that it was as if Dad was whispering everything in her ear. I mean, very personal family things that nobody could know. No one could look this stuff up about me and my life. But when I said, that looks like my dad, but oh my gosh, that's what he looked like when he was in his 20s. She says, when we all transition, she says, you get to pick your favorite age. Those of us who have maybe weight problems don't in the hereafter. Those of us who have sickness in life, we don't in the hereafter. We are restored to full health, and we get to pick our most favorite age. So I just thought that was really brilliant. I studied, what else did I study? One of the neatest things I studied was electronic voice phenomena. I know you've talked about that, but I've personally studied with Tom and Lisa Butler, who were really foremost in studying the American Association for Electronic Voice Phenomena, which is now called the A-Trans-C. I think they have atransc.com or .org, and it's all the different ways people are getting in touch with the hereafter using things like sound and television and computers and things. But on my very secretive path, again, this is all top secret because I was studying all this stuff under the radar screen as I'm cooking for the race car teams and not telling anybody about it. I went on a weekend retreat at the Omega Center in upstate New York, in Rhinebeck, New York, and the name of their course was Electronic Voice Phenomena, and I was scared to death that, as kids, I don't know how old you are, Jeremy, but as a kid, we used to take an album and have it on the turntable and spin it backwards, and it would sound like the devil, was talking, really creepy sounds. And so, I'm like, okay, I'm going to use a tape recorder and record the sound of deceased people. Like how, I was frightened. But when I met Tom and Lisa, they explained that everything is made up of energy. Everything. We are made up of energy, but sound waves are made up of an energy. And when you take a cassette recorder, which there aren't too many of those left, or a digital tape recorder, or some people even get these with their iPhones and cell phones and things. But when you record the sound of what's called white noise, and it could be like a station on a television that's kind of in between signals, or radio station, or but even the sound of water, to have a shower playing in the background and the sound of water, that your recorder is recording the sound. However, prior to doing one of these recordings, what we were trained to do is to, again, imagine a very high energy area. And this is, you think you're making this up, or I did anyways. I thought, oh my gosh, we're imagining this like a vortex of energy around us swirling. And, I'm like, okay, let's just imagine it and see what happens. And then we would talk to our deceased loved ones, and we would just ask them to put voices on our recorders. And so the theory is that they can actually manipulate the sound that was recording and turn it into voices. And so over the course of the weekend, Tom and Lisa gave us a lot of examples of these voices, and they were great, but to me, that wasn't enough proof to go home and tell people that, I heard these voices. Like, Jeremy, I need to hear something for me. Like, I needed to do it for me. And so on the Saturday night of the class, I go back to my cabin. It was by myself. It was pouring rain. I remember it was just like so rainy, but the raindrops were very loud. And our homework was to try to get one of these EVPs. So I hold my digital tape recorder in my hand, And I tell you, I thought I'm just talking to myself, but I visualized my grandmother, my grandfather, my aunt, and my uncle at the foot of my bed. And I was cold, and like I said, the rain was coming down. I was out in the woods, and a neat place to go, but it was late and rainy. And so with the recorder, just recording the raindrops, I say, okay, if you guys are here and this is real, because now at this point, Jeremy, I'm really getting this like sixth sense that I'm supposed to help people with grief. I'm supposed to help people really believe that life after death is real. But I'm like, I need proof. So I said, again, this is with the recorder on. I said, I need you to talk very loud, like really try to talk loud, and then I'll say good night. So I let this thing record for just a minute, and then I say good night. So I got a pair of headphones, and the ones that wrap around your ear are the best as opposed to the earbuds, and I put that into my digital tape recorder. Digital recorder, and I press the play button. Now, most people with EVPs, we use a computer and we upload the minute clip, and then we actually go looking for sounds, and we can loop the sounds back around to really listen for things, because most EVPs are just whispers in the background noise. They're very hard to detect. You got to train your ear for them. But I'm listening, Jeremy, and all of a sudden at the second marker, number 46, I am flooded with goosebumps, like, because I hear a voice. I mean, it was spooky. And then I play it back, and the voice says, "Good night, Sandra," in a man's voice. And then there's two little whispers of women's voices saying, good night, good night. And then there's a man's voice that says, good night. And
it was the Waltons recreated.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I know. That's pretty funny. But it wasn't. And what it did is, as cool as that might sound, it scared the heck out of me, because all of a sudden now, everything that I just saw mentally, it's like I'm hearing something like this is real. And so I started having this fright, like, am I never alone? I mean, are people with me all the time? Like, it was like, I really thought, like, there's just, there's tons of people around me. That's how I felt. And so as nice as it was to now believe in life after death, I was kind of creeped out. And there's a medium, I don't remember her name, but she's got a book called "Do Dead People Watch Me in the Shower?" Right? Because people want to know, are people always with us? Are they always watching? No, they're not. There's our souls keep learning on the other side. They can be back with us in the blink of an eye if we need them. But no, we are not being stalked and watched in our private moments. But anyways, I went into class the next day, and I said, guys, I've got something to play. And Tom and Lisa were thrilled. They're like, you have a Class A EVP. They're rare, but they do exist. And so for the next couple of years, I was so busy doing electronic voice phenomena, telling people about it. Like, I now had the courage to not only say my experience in the doing the medium readings, but like not only listen to this "Good night, Sandra," but Jeremy, I'd start working with people just for free, just giving it away. Like, let's see if we can get somebody in. And at that point, I started opening up my mind, and I had this commitment that if I saw somebody in my mind's eye, I would tell the person. And I remember this one man, his name was Billy. I just had met him at a seminar, and his sister had passed away when they were kids. And, I said, well, let's try to do one of these recordings. And so I would, wherever we were, like a hotel room or something, I'd put the shower and the faucet on for the background sound. And I would literally only record a minute, just a minute, because it could take an hour to go through a minute's EVP. But working with this guy, Billy, I saw in my mind's eye this girl with pigtails, little gap between her teeth, about 9 years old, brown hair, blue eyes. And what came out on the recording is, "I love you, Billy." And then it said, "Remember the game we used to play? Remember Clue?" So he heard it. I heard it. I described what the girl looked like. He's like, "That's her." And lo and behold, Clue was their favorite game as kids. And he went from like grieving to living his life in a second. And that's when I saw, this is the gift of people believing in life after death, is a lot of people die internally when their loved ones die. Like, we stop living. There's nothing to live for. We're so depressed. And to give the people the gift of knowing that their loved one is still around, people can go on living again. And it's a really awesome thing to help people through grief. But so I've done a ton of these electronic voice phenomena, recordings. And then now that I have my book, I've really been like, okay, what else is out there? I mean, what else? I'm going to the UK in May. I'm going to take a week-long course in mediumship at the Arthur Findlay School, which for mediums, they call it like the Hogwarts for mediumship, because I'm sick and tired of like being afraid to actually do medium readings. I want to be trained by the best. If I'm meant to be a medium, fine. If I'm not, fine. I just want to find out, but I've seen some neat things. Like there's a guy named Mark Macy who takes Polaroid pictures of people using this thing called an illuminator. And it sounds nuts. It really does. But I've seen it in action. I was photographed, and the picture that develops from this Polaroid on the picture, it looks kind of fuzzy, but what happens is people's different faces appear within like the picture of my face. And it didn't with me, but the lady sitting next to me, her daughter had either jumped off a building or was pushed off a building and was deceased. And she had shown me a picture of her daughter. And this woman was an African-American woman with a really skinny, long face. And her daughter had wild, crazy afro hair, big smile on her face, looked like full of life in this picture. And I saw this woman get her photograph taken, and then we both had our photographs in hand, and we sit down in our chairs, and we're both watching our photographs develop. And hers was so clear. I could see her long, skinny face develop. This is the mom. And then right like on the outside of her, all of a sudden you could see teeth. You could see the image of her daughter appear in the picture as well. And that was just so cool. And like, that's something that sounds so crazy. Had I not like witnessed it and seen it with other people, I wouldn't think it was real.
My guest is Sandra Champlain. We're talking about life after death, and we've got a couple of segments left with her. You had talked about EVPs, and actually Class A EVPs, which are those actual voice phenomena that my listeners have heard us refer to before. I'm interested in why over-the-ear headphones would be better for listening to those than earbuds. Obviously, we're doing two different things, but if I was going to be listening to audio, I would prefer the earbuds because I think that they have a more whole sound because it reaches your eardrum a little bit differently, but obviously we're doing two different things.
Well, and I just thought about something. When I learned EVP, it was back in 2005. And technology has changed a lot. So back then, which seems like a long time ago, it was over-the-ear headphones. I don't know if our earbud technology was as good as it is now. So I'm with you. I know Bose makes like some great earbuds, and some other people do, and even the ones I use now.
I endorse the wooden earbuds from Sea Crane Company.
Okie dokie.
I don't know if you've ever listened. If you've ever listened to headphones that have wood instead of plastic, it's a million times better.
Neat. No, I haven't. Thank you for that.
And so you're a radio person, so you'll enjoy that. Maybe a Christmas present or something.
Yes, I like that.
From Edward in our chat room, have you ever interviewed anybody that went to hell and back?
Oh, I did. There's a man named Pastor. Well, he's now a pastor, Howard Storm. He was a bad guy. And there's also a guy named Daniel Brinkley who had some interesting experiences. But Pastor Howard Storm was someone who lived on the wrong side of the tracks and did some real negative things. And he, like the doctor, he had the opportunity to get an opportunity to see what his life would be like from doing a positive thing, and he turned his life around. But he described, I don't want to relive it, but he described it as a really dark experience. So he was one to say, really clean up your stuff before death, really make amends, do the best you know to do.
Well, Sandra Champlain certainly does see dead people. She is my guest tonight for most of the rest of this hour. It's one of those shows tonight where there is an underlying theme, and I know that you're catching on as well to the program tonight. It's all about death. Bloody death. Well, Sandra, what is the most profound thing that a spirit has ever told you?
The most profound? I don't know. Just a second. You know what? Can we talk about something else and I come back to that? Because I'm sure there's something great. It's just like I'm put in the spot and like,
okay,
found.
Yeah, no problem. We'll make sure that we come back to that.
Okay.
Does everyone who passes interact with those who are still over here? And by that I mean one who passes here on Earth and moves, through the light and actually is not an earthbound spirit but has crossed over. Does everyone who has crossed over at some point interact with those of us down here in the interlife?
I don't know if we do. I think there's an at-home study course in mediumship, which sounds pretty funny, but there's a gentleman who is a real skeptic who's now a very good medium in the UK called Martin Twycross, and he said that in the hereafter, we all vibrate on different energetic levels. And there's a lot of people here on Earth who desperately try to reach a loved one through a medium. And sometimes you can't get through to them. They're like, oh, that person's not there. And that might not be the case. It just might be that the medium can't match vibrations to the energetic level of your deceased loved one to be able to pick up on what they have to say. So from what I've learned from everyone I've talked to, they say that our loved ones can see us, they can be here with us. In a blink of an eye, they can be here to comfort us. There's training to be done in the hereafter on how to communicate with us here on Earth. Just like I had just interviewed someone today about telekinesis and really, even things like remote viewing, like how powerful our minds are. But we have to be trained to be able to do that. Our loved ones have to be able to be trained to put in our path, or I was just going to say, like, put a penny in our path, or, how sometimes the lights go on and off, or we can have some computer troubles and we think, oh, our loved one's around, or a light switch goes on and off. Weird things can happen, and we get the sense that it's our loved ones. And it takes training to be able to manipulate energy to be able to show us things. So I think it really takes something for them to learn how to visit us in our dreams and to and do some of these things. But I do think that they are all able to come and be with us and comfort us, and there's no time in the hereafter, so it's not like they're mourning for you. It's not like they're missing you. They know, in just a blink of an eye, we'll all be together again. Does that answer your question?
Certainly does.
Okay.
855-952-TALK. That's 855-952-8255. We've got a couple more minutes with Sandra Champlain. And again, tell us about that offer that you have at your website.
Yeah, WeDon'tDieRadio.com. That's where my podcast is housed. And I have the Insiders Club. And if you click on that, there's a whole bunch of things that I give you that normally is in my book, but there's several chapters of my book that the good stuff, what you want to know about the rest of my journey, all the different things that I did learn that convinced me life after death is real. And I also mentioned in your chat room, I've done things like remote viewing and the EVPs and things that really make me know that we are more than just the body that we're in. So when people can have an experience of either seeing pictures in a magazine before they've ever opened the magazine, or seeing something on someone's coffee table halfway around the world, it's like, it's an ESP technique. But when you can do that, you realize, like, we have to be so much more than just this body. So We Don't Die Radio, WeDon'tDieRadio.com. Click on Insiders Club, and you can read more. Because obviously we can't get to all of it in this interview.
Yeah. Where do you think that heaven is, Sandra?
Oh, that's a great question, Jeremy. When I talk to mediums and even the things that I've done, it happens so quickly that when we quiet our mind, we can pick up on things. So what I have been told by everybody is that the heavenly realm, if you want to call it heaven or the hereafter, is vibrating within the same energy space that we are actually in right now. And if anybody looks, wherever you're sitting, whatever you're doing, and you're looking at anything, so I've got a water bottle next to me, I have books on the shelves, I've got a notebook in front of me, down to our tiniest particle, ourselves, and even everything we're looking at, even the quantum level, everything is energy. Everything, inside of every atom, there's just vibrating energy. That's all everything is made up of. So when we pass away, when our body goes, well, we still are energy. Similar to, I would say, a fire. When a fire burns, like a log burns, and the log is now gone, but there's heat. Or if you see a puddle in the ground and it evaporates, well, the water is not in that puddle, but the water still exists in another form. Heaven, I say, is all around us. Two strings of energy can live in the same place at the same time. And if you don't think that's possible, many of us right around us right now, we have the wireless internet signals bouncing around. We have television signals. We have GPS signals. We have our cell phones that are picking up on radio waves. So energy right now, wherever we are, is actually happening. We have an invisible world of energy happening anyways, which we can all agree upon because we're able to use our cell phones and our computers and hook up to the Wi-Fi and things like that. So I say heaven is in that same place, and we can all access it. We can all talk to our loved ones, whether we hear them back. We might not be finely tuned enough to hear them, but you can trust they're there. You need to quiet the conscious mind. I call it the voice in my book. We all have that nonstop, chatty Cathy that's yep. But when we can get in the present moment, that's the time we can have visions of our loved ones. It's the time people can come in through dreams. If you get a sense that a loved one is with you, trust they are. Really trust that they are. But heaven is right here, right around us right now.
Very interesting way of looking at it, Sandra. I really appreciate that interpretation of it. Consciousness is a subject that really fascinates me. Listeners know that. They probably roll their eyes when they see it in the story links. They go, oh, God, Jeremy's going to talk about consciousness again. Or when they know we're talking about life after death. Or when I bring up certain stories about whether or not, there's a scientific definition of consciousness, what consciousness means to certain people and to others. And everybody has, a different interpretation, a different definition of what it may actually be. I think we can all agree it is something that is outside of us, right?
Yeah, I would say. There's a feeling like that we are somebody with a soul, right? We're bodies with a soul. And I actually think that we're a soul with the body. Like our soul goes so much further outside of us. And so, like, our consciousness is there as well, because there could be no more us, the flesh and bones, but our consciousness still survives. Like, I think we're just so much bigger than we think. And I just want to say one quick thing. I've been listening to an audiobook on the Wright brothers, who invented the first flying machine back in 1903. And back in the late 1800s, people thought they were crazy. Like, there is no way that man can fly. And they were ridiculed and harassed. And, of course, other people around the world were trying to jump off cliffs with wings, and they'd all die. It was not pretty. But these guys were so committed that there is a way. And lo and behold, I think it was December 13th, 1903, this flying machine actually worked. And it's the airplane. And yesterday I was on an airplane coming back from California. And now we take for granted air travel. I'm like, oh yeah, no big deal. I'm just in this tube flying, 600 miles an hour, 30,000 feet above the earth with 200 other people. It's become just regular. And I believe in the whole life after death world, like, there's pioneers out there, and we're some of them, like, that are really pushing the envelope, proving that this is real, and there's going to be more to come. And I think 20 years down the road, this will be regular. Like, we'll be able to get in touch with our deceased loved ones in heaven. It might sound crazy, but so did the airplane. And 100 years ago, people didn't think the radio or a telephone or an iPhone or any of those things can exist. And lo and behold, we are living in the most miraculous world right now. But our brains just say, that's just the way things are. It's, made it no big deal. But I tell you, flying 600 miles an hour in a steel tube at 30,000 feet, that's miraculous. But it took two brothers with a vision that didn't give up. And look where we all have now,
Do you believe that consciousness is something that succeeds us in death and maybe might precede us as well? Succeed us in the sense that, how do you explain somebody who has passed over having contact with those of us here in the interlife? And precede, how do you explain people who come onto this earth with what they describe as pre-birth memories?
Yeah, I think so. I think consciousness, it just always is. I think our souls always were, always are. And the illusion of life is that we are just this body. And I think we are all given that ego, if you want to call it an ego, or I call it the voice, that thing that traps us into believing that we're just this body. I mean, how many of us look at ourselves in the mirror every morning and there's something wrong with us, or we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, and, that negativity that we have. If we were to believe 24/7 that we are these infinite souls, right, that who we are in heaven or the hereafter, like we are actually made up of that soul stuff right now. But if we were to believe that right now, it would kind of, I mean, this might sound silly, but it would take sort of the fun out of being on planet Earth. I mean, if this is the place that we have the good, the bad, the experiences, the other people to deal with, the three dimensions, really dealing with emotions and hardships and joys. I mean, this is where the good stuff is. So we can't remember it 24/7. I mean, we need to really play along like this is it, so we get our money's worth out of living life.
.com. Noticing the theme with the program tonight? I know you're loving it as well. Sandra, final thoughts on life after death?
Well, this goes along with your profound thought. It's just the fact that we live this illusion that we're just these bodies in heaven or the hereafter. We are so powerful. I mean, we can make things happen. We can communicate telepathically. We can send love. We can send healing. We are those same souls now. So these people that talk about like things like The Secret and the Law of Attraction and all that stuff, like I think it's all real. I mean, we really, like, I've experienced remote viewing and ESP techniques that blow my mind. I've picked up sounds from the hereafter. I've seen things in my mind's eye. I mean, we really are souls having this human experience. And so don't trust everything you see as the truth. Look at life like every experience you have is here for your soul's growth. Don't be a victim in life. And I know there's some bad things that happen, but out of the worst things that happen can come the best things and opportunities to help others. And just play the game that this whole life was designed for you, for your soul, to learn, to grow, and to really expand. Do we have time for the UFO story now?
Absolutely. That's exactly where I wanted to get to. But in case we run out of time, let's go ahead and give out your contact information where folks can be in touch with you.
Yes, sandrachamplain.com or WeDon'tDieRadio.com. That will both take you to my website, and you can email me at Sandra@sandrachamplain.com. That works. I answer my email, or on Facebook, Sandra Champlain, Twitter, Sandra Champlain. Although I'm not so good on checking on Twitter, but I do.
Well, 140 characters, it probably makes you a little irritated like it does
I know.
me.
And so many things come through, and it's hard to filter through.
Yeah, exactly.
But the UFO story. So Dad was an airline pilot, captain for American Airlines. And when, I don't even know how old I was, 14 or 16 or something like that, he had told a story that he had kind of kept quiet. But he said one night when he was in the cockpit with both the first officer and the engineer, so there were three of them in the cockpit, right? Now you got to remember, Dad's the one who never believed in anything. And kids, if you know, psychic things can be real and stuff. He said that there was a craft that hovered so close to them that all three of them were very, very fearful, just filled with lights going around it. It wasn't on the radar screen, and it came very close to the airplane. It just hovered there just for maybe 10 seconds. And then he said it left just like a blink of an eye. They all saw it. They all witnessed it. And my father at that point said, you don't have to see it to believe it. I mean, there can be so much more than we know. And when we know that there's actually billions of galaxies out there and billions of planets that are in the habitable zone, and if that's the word, like to be kind of closed-minded and think, aliens aren't real and that UFOs aren't real. I mean, that's just that ego mind of ours. We are so much more powerful than we know. That it was really cool having that story come from my father, though, like to see that. And he's like, there's something out there, kids. It's really cool.
All right. We'll circle back around. The most profound thing a spirit has told you.
Well, I think it was what I was just getting back to a little bit before of who we are right now, and the fact that when that moment comes of our passing, there is an opportunity. It's kind of like a graduation day that you actually get to share, like, this is what I learned, this is what I did, and you know, the most, those who make the most difference and have the most love in their heart, and you know, the most miracles show up in life for people that do the most for other people. Like that's the really the gold in living our life. And the bad things that happen to us really aren't bad. Everything is an experience for the soul. And again, like, out of a really horrible experience, the death of my father, Jeremy, was actually the thing that had me write my book, because I also include things about grief that have helped prevent suicides. I mean, there's some pretty big things in my grief chapter, just one chapter in the book. But out of my dad's death and the pain I was in, I was able to put, like, really know in my heart that it's time for me to come out with the information that I have and to help people. And so now there's, you know, been, I don't know, 20,000 people that have been helped with the book. And I can't even tell you how many people have listened to my radio show and all that. And so there's healing that's taking place, and none of that would have happened had I not hit rock bottom when my dad passed. So when we're going through something really tough, it can be awful. But, you know, many years forward, you can look back and say, geez, I needed that to be where I am today. So don't be a victim in life. Play the game that you're responsible, and this whole life is for you and your soul growth, and you'll be in a better place.
Sandra Champlain, author of We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. It has been a fascinating conversation. Best to you. I look forward to doing it another time.
Thank you.
We will be back